Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from the third group will present about translation procedures. The members of this group are Inayatul Fardah, Razan A, Jihan Ilmiatul C, and Clarisa Maulida. And my name is Inayatul Fardah. I would like to explain about the definition of translation procedures and the example of translation procedures. Translation procedures are the technical device used to transfer the meaning of a text in one language into a text in another language. They involve essentially adding structure or lexical elements to those present in the SL or subtracting from them, eliminating elements that are obligatory in the SL or source language but unnecessary in the TL or target language or with no counterpart there, and where disparity between the two media goes beyond language patterns, adapting the content of the message so that the TL text will come as close as possible to the intent of the SL text and create a similar impact. Okay, here we have some examples of translation procedures. The first is adding. The source language is saya guru, and then the target language will be I am a teacher. So in this sentence, there are two additions that are am and a. And then the second examples, the short language is Hari tidak merokok, and then the translation is Hari does not smoke. Okay, the third example is subtracting. The source language is saya kembali ke rumah, and then the translation or target language is I return home. So the word ke is subtracted in the translation. Okay, the next example is about subtracting and adapting. Here we have the sentence, Paul is a bookworm, and then the translation into Indonesian is Paul kutu buku. So is and is not translated. And the meaning of bookworm is not about buku cacing, but it is adapting into kutu buku. Okay, for the example of adding and adapting, we have sentence, perlu diketahui bahwa, and it is necessary to know that. Okay, for the last example is about adding and untranslatable. The source language is saya mau melihat jaran kepang. And then the target language will be I want to see jaran kepang. So jaran kepang will not be translated. Translation in the very broad sense of the term can be listed in the terms of different levels of complexity. The form of procedures. The first is translation or transcription. Translation or transcription means rendering the sounds of SL into TL form. For the example, you can see in your screen. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Jihan Ilmiatul C. I will continue the explanation. Second, transliteration. This is the process of rendering the letters of one alphabet into the letters of another with a different alphabetical system. For example, from the Russian Cyrillic alphabet into the Latin one, from the Arabic into Latin. No transliteration takes place between Indonesian and English since both use the Latin alphabets. The third is borrowing. According to Molina and Albert, argued that borrowing is a translation technique using words or expressions directly from other languages. For example, the word lobby taken from English borrowed by Spanish. Additionally, Richard said that borrowing is a word or phrase taken from a language and used in other languages. For example, English took the phrase courage, although the pronunciation is different from the French language.
My name is Razan A. In here, I want to explain about literal. Literal, this is one-to-one structural and conceptual correspondence. It can include borrowing and word-for-word translation. This presupposes a kind of interlingual synonym. In simple definition, literal is a technique of translation is to translate a word or expression word by word. It doesn't mean that it translates one word for another word, but rather than to translate word by word based on the function and the meaning in the sentence level. The example, in Indonesia, 5 buku. In English, 5 books. Mary telah datang. Mary has come. John sedang menyanyi. John is singing. Applet, Chitney. Danta atau gading, ivory. Kepinding, bedbug. Limas, pyramid. Garuk, scratch. Keok atau dikalahkan, defeated. Peri, nymph. The next explanation is transposition. Transposition is one of the most common procedure used in translation. It involves replacing a grammatical structure in the SL with one of a different type in the TL in order to achieve the same effect. This grammatical adjustment will be dealt with more intensively in Module 2. In simple definition, transposition is grouped into an indirect translation technique because it tries to change a grammatical category. The example of transposition in Indonesia, perlu diketahui bahwa menulis modul itu memakan waktu dalam bentuk pasif. In English, you should know that module writing takes time in passive. And the second example, in Indonesia, saya tentu datang kalau tahu. Sayang, saya tidak tahu maka tidak datang. In English, I would have to come if I had known.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name Clarisa Maulida F R. Okay, I will continue the explanation. Number 6. Modulation. Modulation in this case is the indirect technique of translation that changes the point of view. Focus or cognitive categories existing in the search language both lexically and structurally. According to Newmark in Machali, modulation is divided into two, compulsory and free modulation. The first example, you are going to have a baby. Kamu akan menjadi seorang ayah. The second example, my bread was eaten by him. Dia yang makan roti. The last is adaptation. This procedure is used when the others do not suffice. It involves modifying the concept or using a situation analogous to the source language situation to not identical to it. An adaptation may at the same time entail modulation and transposition. In translating from one language into another language, normally, he or she should always study the text as a whole before he begins to translate it. After obtaining a picture of the whole, he can break it up into its parts. The analysis will move in the opposite direction from the fragments to the whole, from the simpler to the more complex. The smallest unit of equivalence should be determined first. The levels of equivalence is ascending order are as follows. The first, substitution of print letter for print letter. For example, from Arabic into Roman, from Japanese into Roman, or from Chinese into Roman. The second, substitution of morpheme for morpheme. For example, kerja work, pekerja worker, bekerja work or works or worker. The third, substitution of word for word. For example, careful, hati-hati, open, terbuka. Number 4, substitution of phrase for phrase. For example, careful, a careful worker, seorang pekerja yang hati-hati. Number 5, substitution of sentence for sentence. For example, she always works carefully. Dia selalu bekerja dengan hati-hati. Number 6, substitution of paragraph for paragraph. So I think that's all of us. Sorry if there is some mistake. Thank you for attention. The last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.